Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. This morning we begin with Serbia, where the President of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, has said that there will be no transitional government after the resignation of Prime Minister Miloš Vučević. Now, the leader added that authorities need to quickly decide whether to form a new government or hold elections in a little over 2 months.
Between 45 and 60 days are needed for the election campaign, so we could have elections in about 75 days, roughly in April, most realistically before the May Day holidays, or we will have a new government in the meantime. But let me tell you right away, there will be no transitional governments, because that doesn't depend on pressure or anything else. The idea of handing over power to plenums or opposition parties doesn't even cross my mind.
Serbian Prime Minister Miloš Vučević stepped down on Tuesday, marking the latest concession by the country's government towards protesters who have been taking to the streets for nearly 3 months now. But now, will this resignation be enough to quell public outrage, or will this rising tensions force preterm elections? Well, our reporters Pavel Časkovski and Anastasia Yanchenko have more.
I have made the final decision to resign from the position of Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia.
Vučević resigned to appease the enraged Serbian society. In November last year, in Novi Sad, a building collapsed, killing 15 people. It happened just 4 months after the lengthy and costly renovation of the 60-year-old building was completed. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, as Serbians took their discontent to the streets.
The main reason is that people thought and felt and knew that this was because of corruption.
Originally, it was Serbian students who took to the streets, but they were soon joined by other groups: academics, school teachers, farmers. Daily protests continued for close to 3 months in more than 100 cities across the country, to eventually culminate in a 24-hour blockade of one of the main intersections in Belgrade. And another massive protest is expected to take place soon.
Students are already planning the next major demonstration for February 1st. When we were at the demonstrations, these leaflets were being distributed to ensure widespread participation, and the next big demonstration will happen in Novi Sad.
The Prime Minister's resignation was supposed to be a move that would satisfy the protesters. But according to some involved in the protests, it was too little, too late.
I can tell you that we expected this resignation last night, but it didn't happen. So the government ignored the biggest protest yet that lasted for 24 hours.
Other measures were also announced by Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić, including a major government reshuffle, which might result in the replacement of half of the minister roster, and a debate on confidence in the current government to be held on Wednesday. However, as some of the protesters were arrested and even beaten, calls for major political change are becoming increasingly common.
What we really want is for the prosecutors and judiciary to prosecute those responsible. So these protests will not stop until we see responsibility in courts.
This is arguably the biggest political crisis for Aleksandar Vučić, who has served as president of Serbia since 2017. For the moment, he's refusing to step down, despite growing opposition on the streets.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called the rising popularity of far-right Alternative for Germany party the biggest political alarm imaginable. Now, the Polish leader was backed by outgoing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau during their meeting in Warsaw on Tuesday. Now, the two prime ministers also signed an agreement on nuclear energy. Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
The two prime ministers were all smiles when signing an agreement on the safe use of nuclear energy and Canadian investments in Poland in that field. But they quickly got serious when asked by journalists about the rise of far-right parties in Europe.
It's an incredibly dangerous trend. As a historian, I can't imagine a bigger political alarm than 20% of support for a party like AfD.
The outgoing Canadian Prime Minister, who came to Poland for the anniversary of Auschwitz camp liberation, also warned against history repeating itself.
The hatreds that are dividing peoples across borders in just about every regions of the world are cause for alarm.
Last weekend, thousands of people protested on the streets of German cities against AfD after it had officially launched its election campaign, while the protesters were critical of the AfD's anti-immigrant stance.
All humans are equal. Everyone has the same rights. There are human rights that must be upheld, and that's what we stand up for.
Experts say the anti-immigration policy is the main reason behind the party's popularity.
And the AfD is trying to use that against the other government, against the other parties, saying that they did not address the issues the way they should have.
Germany is preparing for snap parliamentary elections, which will take place in late February. The Christian Democratic CDU, currently leading the polls, has so far denied the possibility of forming a ruling coalition with the AfD.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has accused the leader of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, of breaking his word. Now, Scholz warned last evening that Merz could change his mind after the election and choose to work with the AfD.
Anyone who says I don't care who votes for my motions has to put up with citizens asking themselves whether they also don't care who votes for them in the German Bundestag. And that is why there is one good thing about this terrible procedure. Citizens know where they stand. And I will put it very clearly, a back-blue majority in the German Bundestag must be prevented. Otherwise, we will have a government that nobody in this country wants.
Now, this year we'll see a number of crucial elections taking place across Central and Eastern Europe. Lessons learned during recent votes in Romania and Moldova have prompted fears of mass foreign interference. Now, it's increasingly easy and cheap to influence election campaigns at scale. Our Michael van Bloemsteen has more.
The increased interference in European elections, most notably in Romania and Moldova, hasn't gone unnoticed. Alarmed by what happened there, the Polish government on Tuesday announced a comprehensive program intended to counteract attempts of outside interference.
Monitoring disinformation, training for campaign staff and for journalists and others engaged in the process, improved security for critical applications and free security diagnostic tools. That is, in a nutshell, what we discussed today.
The outside interference has had an effect. In Romania, the obscure candidate Călin Georgescu came in first place during the first round of Romania's presidential elections last November. The results were annulled after intelligence reports indicated illicit campaign financing for the far-right pro-Kremlin candidate. In neighboring Moldova, voters were outright bribed to vote for the pro-Moscow candidate in October and November. In the end, pro-European President Maia Sandu held on to her position. It has motivated other countries to act.
We take responsibility for the electoral process so that nobody can manipulate elections in Poland.
Securing electoral processes is easier said than done.
It's of course interesting to see people trying.
Owing to technological advancements, the number of bot accounts involved in online election interference is increasing exponentially. Even the disinformation itself is increasingly created using AI, making the output even larger. Author and cybersecurity expert Breno de Winter warns.
And there is this fine line between fake news and freedom of speech, that it is kind of hard to really filter that out. And then even if you want to filter something out, the social media companies need to work with you on that one.
The willingness of social media companies to cooperate remains to be seen. Elon Musk, the owner of X, openly endorses the German far-right and pro-Kremlin AfD party.
Hey everyone,
Mark Zuckerberg of Meta announced earlier this month that his platforms will do away with fact-checkers and will work with US President Donald Trump to pressure European governments into relaxing their social media legislation. Meanwhile, interfering in European elections remains an important pillar of Russia's destabilization efforts. The focus has shifted from outright propaganda to more insidious methods.
After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, the European Union banned most Russian state media outlets in the EU. And ever since that, we have seen Russian propaganda actors shift more to indirect strategies, using, for instance, online influencers to spread pro-Russian disinformation.
Online interference isn't just a question of quantity either. A deepfake of Moldovan President Maia Sandu, which depicted her endorsing a pro-Kremlin candidate while dressed in Muslim clothing, went viral on Facebook in 2023. Fighting online election interference is said to become more of a challenge, not less.
A U.S. judge temporarily halted Donald Trump's order to freeze hundreds of billions of dollars in federal grants and loans. Now, the lawsuit was brought by several organizations which say that such a move for already approved funding violates the law. Now, in the hours before the order was due to take effect, there was confusion as to which agencies and programs would be affected. According to the White House, the funding pause would allow the government to cut back spending for, quote, woke gender issues and diversity programs. Now, the pause order will be halted until February 3. Afterward, the judge is expected to consider a longer-term pause on the policy early next week. At least 7 people have been killed in a stampede incident at the Mahakumbh Mela religious festival in northern India. Now, it's thought around 10 others were also injured when tens of millions gathered on a riverbank for a devotional dip in the water. Now, the 6-week Hindu festival is held at the confluence of the Ganga and Yamuna rivers in Uttar Pradesh. It's thought people who were sleeping by the riverbank were trampled as crowds approached the river. This Wednesday marks the beginning of the Chinese Lunar New Year. We now bid farewell to the Year of the Dragon and welcome the Year of the Snake. Now, every Lunar New Year transitions from one sign of the Chinese zodiac to another. The snake is the 6th of the 12-year cycle of animals. In Chinese culture, snakes are regarded as intelligent, spiritual, and elegant. They also represent the concept of renewal. The Lunar New Year is usually celebrated for around 2 weeks. Now, the Festival of Lanterns marks the last day of the festivities. And those celebrating gather to light different types of lanterns, which symbolize letting go of the past and welcoming in the new. And on that note, we end this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana, but don't go away. Up next, World Talks.